All right, welcome to episode 69 of the At Bat Podcast presented by War Media, where we give you our thoughts on the latest Chicago baseball news as well as take a trip around the league. I am Saul Rodriguez, joined by my co-host today, Gabe Wilkins, who you have seen on War Media's Open Run Talking Hoops, but he now has his own podcast named The State of Gabe, available exclusively on Spotify. How we doing, Gabe?
I'm doing excellent, Saul, man. It's always a pleasure to be talking baseball, especially in the wake of seeing that man one guy do his thing last night on the gridiron.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I mean, Chicago, and we'll get into it, but the baseball season, of course, had a sour ending for the Cubs. It has been sour for the White Sox, but some of these guys, in other sports now with Justin Fields or whether it be Connor Bedard, you get see spurts of greatness, and it's great for Chicago. Any type of it, even if it doesn't mean wins or losses on certain things, certain games. I mean, for the Bears, it meant a win, but you got to take it and enjoy it anytime you can. That's for sure. But and we'll get into it. But like I said, we'll talk a little bit we'll close out the Cubs and White Sox seasons, as well as maybe some rumored talk, but also the main thing we'll talk about today, of course, will be MLB postseason. Of course, as the wild card series is wrapped up by now, I mean, that was like in a flash, in a blink of an eye, you could have missed it. And now the LDS starts on Saturday the 7th. So, of course, we'll talk about that as well. But let's start off with Chicago baseball, man. I mean, first, we'll start with the Cubs just because, they had a chance to, be in the postseason. Didn't work out. They just ended up, going, continuing that downward spiral that we were talking about last time we were on here. And it just didn't work out. I mean, they lost that. They got swept by the Braves in that heartbreaking series. Then they went into Milwaukee, and they needed to win all three at that point because Miami was just winning, kept winning. So, you know, overall, it's disappointing they couldn't make the postseason, but obviously now you have a week kind of like, past that to kind of take it all in. I'm not too disappointed on the fact that like they didn't make it as much as I was maybe like Sunday, but it's you get to reflect on it more now that you have more time away from it. So a lot of guys had some great seasons. They had like five guys with 20 home runs. They had obviously a Cy Young candidate in Justin Steele. So plenty of stuff to look forward to. And we'll get into the Pete Alonso talk because offseason talk started I feel like it started on Sunday for the Cubs. But
Definitely.
overall, what were your thoughts on the Cubs season? Obviously, looking back at it now, like I said, there's a lot of positives, but they Cubs fans obviously we really wish we were out there in the postseason because as we saw from the wild card series, man, you just need to get in.
Well, I remember talking with you prior to the start of the
Mm-hmm.
season, Saul, as well as Miles, about how the Cubs were taking these gambles on certain guys, mostly veteran guys that were experienced, had been in the postseason and won championships.
Mm-hmm.
And those gambles, with the exception, I would say, of Eric Hosmer and Trey Mancini, paid off in a major way with guys like Cody Bellinger,
Mm-hmm.
who helped spark this ball club and provided them with the energy in which they needed to get into the thick of the wild card race and be within that race all the way down to the end. I thought they exceeded expectations. I saw this being a team that could be close to 500, but anytime you finish over 500, considering the young talent that they have, you would take that. But it's an unfortunate ending because they were in control of their destiny following that sweep of the San Francisco Giants after Labor Day weekend. And I was of the belief on the outside looking in that they were more than likely going to get that second, if not third wild card spot in the National League and be in the postseason this year. With all of that said, though, it's so much that I have concern about when it comes to their future, especially when it comes down to keeping Cody Bellinger. Are you going to be able to do that? From what Jesse Rogers and the likes are reporting, it don't look like it. And I think a team like the New York Yankees would be calling him, especially with that short porch out in left field. And then, like if you lose him, that's your biggest power back. So where's the power going to come from? That's why the Pete Alonso story is one that's going to be very interesting to follow this offseason.
Yeah, and like I said, we pretty much have said it all in the sense of the Cubs season and what could have been and what they did and what they accomplished. So, it could easily transition into that the trade talk because as you said, Cody Bellinger, it does seem like everyone's, everything is past tense with this guy. Like, I mean, he talked about how great it was to play in Chicago and all that, but now you look at, the way Jed Hoyer talks about it and the way, things are looking, it doesn't look like he's going to come back.
At all.
I saw David Kaplan said that somebody close to the team, whether it be reporter or not, one of his sources said that that they weren't going to bring him back because they got their center fielder of the future, and that he literally said that his source said that because Kaplan said, okay, but what about first base? And that apparently the person said first base doesn't matter. So I don't know what that means, but but no, but yeah, it is gonna be terrible if they don't bring back Bellinger. But ultimately, I don't see it either. Like, I just don't see them bringing him back. Like, I think if they're gonna get guys this offseason, it looks like they're gonna go to the trade. It looks like they're gonna go the trade route. Like,
They got
it
to.
looks, yeah, it looks like they, because if they don't get Bellinger, and they go out there and get Alonso, and this is just wishful thinking. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but they could easily go out there and then trade for like a Juan Soto as well. Like, they don't necessarily have to sign these guys, and they have plenty of prospect capital, as we always talk about. And and obviously, it's one of those things where you look at some of the prospects that the Cubs have. And some fans are like, oh no, I don't want to get rid of this guy. I don't want to get rid of that guy. And I'm like, dude, to make some of these decisions, you're gonna have to get rid of guys you don't want to get rid of. It's plain and simple. And the thing is and it's funny because I'm not gonna sit here and say I'm not the type of person. The only person that they're the only fan that I don't, or sorry, the only player that I wouldn't want to part ways with if I had to choose one guy not to get rid of is obviously PCA. Like, I feel like he fits well in like a lot of ways defensively, our leadoff man, whatever in the future. But it's funny though, because my buddy, I told him, I was like, man, I understand we're probably gonna have to get rid of PCA in a fat deal for like a Soto or whatever it is. But he just goes like, you won't be thinking about him when Juan Soto has 100 walks in May. like like yeah,
That's true.
like it's true.
If you in the thick of the division race in the
yeah,
Central, which will be there for the taking, even
yeah.
though Milwaukee will bolster a strong roster, they're gonna have a roster with some questions and especially with the status of their manager and Craig Counsell being unknown for the foreseeable future as he just completed the last year of his deal with them. The way I see it, though, like, you need a power bat in your lineup, and you also got to solidify that pitching.
Yep.
The pitching did you in from the back end of the starting rotation all the way down to the bullpen. And that's something that they're going to have to spend money on when it comes to reshoring their roster and on with the open market. They just have to do that. And it's going to start this offseason immediately. And I'm pretty sure that Jed Hoyer and the scouting department and staff are having meetings on Clark and Addison as we speak about that one, because they got to get that right. And most of the young prospects that they have consist of arms. And my question is somebody that's observing from the outside looking in, how many of those guys are ready to injured? And he's gonna opt in, but will he be the Marcus Stroman that you saw throughout the first half of the season? That remains to be seen. It's a lot of questions as far as I'm concerned with the Cubs, and a lot of it is all going to come down to whether or not the Ricketts family want to spend that money.
Yeah, that's true. And I think ultimately I'm confident they can make a trade, but am I confident they're willing to spend the money? No, probably not. So it's one of those things where, yeah, you look at the rotation, there's a lot of questions there. And I think they do have guys that I think are ready to contribute at least next year with say, I mean, Cade Horton looks major league ready with how good he is in the minors. I mean, you look at Ben Brown, he looks good. So yeah, but as well, but also, I mean, look, you can't also always bank on those guys. So you really do have
Exactly.
to consider going out there and at least putting in a bid for like a Blake Snell, putting in a bid for like an Aaron Nola, whatever it is. So uh, I hope they do that. I just don't see it happening, at least on the pitching side. Maybe on the position player side, they do go out there and try to get Bellinger, be strong with that. But yeah, you're right. There's just a lot of ifs with this Cubs team, and just a lot of there's a lot of possibilities, sure. But Cubs have shown us time and time again that they're not willing to spend like a team with their market should be doing. So should be spending. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think that'll happen, but we'll have plenty of time to chat about the offseason for sure throughout this as the postseason wraps up later this month. But we'll go into the White Sox. That's a team in Chicago that, of course, they had aspirations going into the season, but of course, throughout the season, it wasn't meant to be. A lot of things went down, and I mean, some call it one of the worst Sox seasons in recent memory, if not one of the worst of this the 2000s of the 21st century. But I don't know. You tell me, Gabe. But it was rough in a lot of ways, not only with controversies, not only with the clubhouse and all that. But how do you overall feel? Because look, at the end of the day, we've talked about this before. There's plenty of negatives, but there's plenty of positives as well, with certain guys coming back from injury or certain this and that. Guys having performances. I mean, Luis Robert Jr., the biggest one, right? But what are your thoughts overall on the White Sox season?
Huge disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
Worst season of my lifetime. I can say that for damn sure. And it was one of those seasons that makes you reflect and understand just how much winning is truly a privilege. I think a lot of times most fans believe because their team possesses a ton of talent that's all they need just to get by.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this White Sox team over the last couple of seasons has proven that you can have all the talent in the world, but when those guys don't come together in jail at the right time and in critical junctures and moments, when adversity strikes, can't win. And a lot of these guys, for every guy I say that will be here next year, it's going to be a lot of guys that won't be. And Chris Getz is going to have his hands extremely full when it comes to trying to convince prospective free agents to come here. Because the White Sox, unfortunately, have become the example of how not to complete a rebuild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think with the addition of all those guys like Gene Watson, adding to the front office, you hope that they're able to put some kind of spin on this offseason where they're able to get some players or make some deals because I hear the chatter right now with certain White Sox fans that want to go out there and deal Eloy, they want to go out there and even deal Cease, which I know you're not in favor, Gabe, but some fans are still out there trying to do so, whether it be like to the Astros or something like.
If the deal right,
yeah,
I'm gonna say this: when it comes to Cease, if the deal is right, I would consider it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, like I
But
know.
if you do it, you gotta make sure that this move helps you to compete within the next year or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I know some and again this could be some random, I don't know where the heck I saw it, but I did see a trade that was like somebody put together and it was like Dylan Cease for um uh Yiner, the
Yonder
catching
Diaz,
Yanner Diaz.
I
Yeah,
saw
I
that
was
on
gonna say
Bleacher Report. Now
Cano.
I didn't
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that
Oh, it
one.
was Bleacher Report. It was Bleacher Report. My fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I wanted to get your thoughts on that one. Like, is that like what did you see on that? Because I mean, not too familiar with Yanner Diaz. I know he's one of their top prospects, but like it just I wasn't too familiar. But yeah, what did you think about that one?
I'm very familiar with Diaz because I saw
Mm-hmm.
Diaz a couple of games when Houston came
Mm-hmm.
into town in May on Mother's Day weekend. He has pop in his bat. White Sox do need depth at the catcher position, and they actually need a starting catcher. And
Mm-hmm.
Yonder Diaz will be able to do that. However, if Yonder Diaz was to, have some great years here in 24 and beyond, he kind of gets in the way of Edgar Quero,
Mm-hmm.
who you acquired in the Lucas Giolito deal, and is a guy that I would think Chris Getz has high hopes and expectations for, even though Rick Hahn was the man that pulled off that trade prior to his departure when he got fired by Jerry Reinsdorf.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are better deals out there, but it would fulfill a need. And this team, let's be real, they haven't had a firm grip on the catcher spot since the days of AJ Pierzynski when he was behind the plate. So I wouldn't mind that, but I told you the teams I would want to do a deal with if I was the White Sox. Baltimore,
Mm-hmm.
Texas comes to mind. Maybe St. Louis, depending on, if they would be willing to put in a player like, let's say, Nolan Gorman, who can play
Mm-hmm.
some second base and is a left-hand bat with some pop. I mean, those are options, but I'm not in a rush to trade Dylan Cease. But
Mm-hmm.
I understand why White Sox fans are, because let them tell you they want to trade everybody because it hasn't produced in wins.
It's there's a lot going on with Sox fans like on that, and for sure I definitely see that. So I mean, it's one of those things where two completely different off seasons, but they're going to be really fascinating on both sides of Chicago to see what these two teams do, because of course the White Sox did say that they want to compete in 2024, whether they believe it or not. And if they go out there and make some moves, you never know, right? So it's like if they want to put their money where their mouth is, I mean, this is the time to do it. If they consider themselves, to compete in 2024.
They said that,
Mm-hmm.
but if you notice, when Chris Getz was speaking in front of the media prior to
Mm-hmm.
the conclusion of the regular season, he kind of backtracked on that and said, I need some time to really assess and evaluate this roster. So if that's the case, 2024 could very well be a bridge year
Mm-hmm.
for 2025 when you have a nice crop of free agents set to enter the marketplace.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way to put it, because obviously you don't want to bet, you don't want to like fully say, hey, I don't know if we're going to compete. Like it's probably the best way to go around, tiptoe around it, just to say, hey, why not next year, just to evaluate, need some time, because it is true though. I feel like to just say that, because I forgot, was it Jerry or was it I
Jerry was the
believe it
one.
was
Jerry
Jerry.
is adamant about
Jerry, yeah,
competing. Yeah, with his
yeah.
quotes, he lets you
Well,
know.
so I mean, it would just, I mean, if you think about it, kind of unfair to Chris Getz to just be like, hey, we're gonna compete next year. So it puts a lot of pressure on Chris Getz and the whole regime to kind of get it going. So at least Chris Getz was able to kind of say his piece and be like, hey, maybe not. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, because I mean they have a lot of options and a lot of guys that are coming back next year that were injured for most of the year, like Crochet. So we'll see how these guys kind of fit into the empty spots the Sox need. So we'll be definitely keeping an eye on that. But we'll shift our focus now to the MLB postseason, because that is, of course, the biggest talking point of Major League Baseball right now. And the wild card series wrapped up. Those 4 series were all sweeps, which, to be honest, I didn't expect. I expected at least a couple to go 3 games. They did not. But we'll go in order. Obviously, we'll look at the Rangers and Rays, Twins, Jays, D-backs, Brewers, Phillies, Marlins, but we'll go in chronological order. The Tampa Bay Rays, man, I mean, that is crazy to me, because I know that they lost last year to the Guardians, so this is kind of looking like a trend now, but still surprised that they went out there and got swept by the Rangers 2-0 and made 5 errors in 2 games. Like, dude, I mean, I did not expect it like that, because hey, and not only that, but they were also outscored 11-1 in the 2 games. What are your overall thoughts on that series? I mean, this is a Rangers team that, to be honest, I'm not surprised at the scoring. I think I'm more surprised on the fact that the pitching was able to do it in the postseason. I know Jordan Montgomery did his thing in the second half of the season. I know what Nathan Eovaldi has done in the postseason in his career and all that, but they got it done, and they got the pitching side of things I think was more in question. They did a favor to their bullpen, who like has been obviously their biggest weakness. They got it done for them, getting deep into the game and doing all that. So, what were your overall thoughts on the Rangers taking out the Rays?
Hell of a performance, man, on both sides of the baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Offensively, we talked about all season long why it helps to play your young guys, right? Look at the way Evan Carter performed.
Mm-hmm.
Think he had like 6 ABs in the series and got on base all 6 times, had a couple home runs, like came through for him in a pivotal spot when they needed that. We talk about underrated outfielders all the time in baseball. Adolis Garcia is one of them. You saw how he went yard and, flipped the bat for good measure to let you know he got all of it. Like Corey Seager, Marcus Simmons, these guys, like they showed you why they are indeed the top offense in all of baseball when they're clicking on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
And I was impressed with the pitching staff or the starting unit, specifically Jordan Montgomery, who's been lights out over his last like 34 to 35 innings of work. And if he continues to dominate at the level that he's been doing over the last month and a half or so, he's going to get paid this offseason in a large lump sum. Man, Nathan Eovaldi was huge. But Tampa, man, if you'd have told me that team won 99 games going into this series, that I watched their final 2 games in that wild card round, I would not have believed you.
Mm-mm.
And I saw them falling off after the hot start.
Mm-hmm.
I know I was on record saying that many times on here, but I didn't see it going like this. A lot of uncharacteristic errors, a lot of unforced errors, and untimely errors that led to their unfortunate demise.
Yeah, and not, you could sit here and say like, they were missing, obviously for, reasons that we all know, Wander Franco, Brandon Lau, of course, he's out with the injury. So you can make an argument, hey, it wasn't the same team that, people were facing in May, but look, at the end of the day, they had more than enough to go out there and have a great series, and they couldn't do it. I mean, they truly in game 1, man, let down glass now. I mean, that dude went out there and pitched a hell of a game, and far from perfect, but the dude pitched a hell of a game, 8 strikeouts, whatever. But the game could have been way different if they didn't go out there and have 4 errors. So yeah, it was one of those things where there's a lot of series where you can split hairs on what exactly happened. This series, dude, like it's as obvious as it can be, where the Rays just, they bit themselves in the foot, and the Rangers never looked back, and they took
at
advantage.
home too.
Yeah, at home too, where we're not, and even in as much as home field advantage, I mean, playing there playing at home no matter what, I'm sure is nice, but Jesus, 19K in
Yeah, I
game
saw
1,
that.
21K in the second, which again, as a baseball fan, for like us, we're not surprised to see that. But like we've seen, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't looked at the numbers, but some of the series against the Red Sox, like back in the day with like against like Manny and Papi and all, like, correct me if I'm wrong, the place was packed, right?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you talk about when they first started experiencing playoff
Yeah.
baseball in Tampa, like
Mm-hmm.
in 2008. But those games were like nighttime games. I
Fair.
don't know what it is when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to daytime playoff games with the Rays, but for some odd reason, it just don't work out well for
Mm-mm.
them. And you like I heard a lot of people say, well, they're playing on a weekday. I mean, did you see San Diego last year when they was playing at like noon against the Phillies in the LCS round? Petco Park was sold out. You couldn't hear a pin drop in that ballpark with how loud it was prior to first pitch.
Hey, not only that, but hey, I'll use that as a segue. Dude, you're talking about using that as an excuse. Look at Minnesota. I mean,
Yeah,
those two games were during the day, and
right.
they were loud as can be. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, Minnesota, they won the series 2-0 over the Jays, which I was so and I have the receipts in case you don't believe me, Gabe, but I did the prediction, the MLB prediction, like the postseason thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the Twins over the Jays, and may not be the craziest guess there, but I just thought the Jays ultimately could have easily, swept the series or won 2-1. They didn't win any game. They went home. But anyways, there was a lot of that series. You can make an argument as well that there is, it was just the offense. The Jays' offense disappeared. They died. Like they didn't have any life in there whatsoever. And the little life that they did have was sucked out by, a Vladdy mistake at second base or whatever whatever it may be there. But in game 1, of course, Royce Lewis showed up. That was badass. Like just seeing him with two just absolute bombs to the left field bleachers, to the right field bleachers. That dude, it was awesome. And then of course, like I said in game two, it just base running mistakes, and I think and I might be wrong on the stat because I haven't seen it exactly, but I think the Blue Jays might have left like 16 or 17 guys on base in those two games. I mean, it was just terrible from the offensive end. And credit to the Twins pitching as well. I mean, Pablo Lopez in game one shoved Sonny Gray in game two. He faced a lot of trouble, but he was able to get out of all of it. And of course, like I said, throwing out Vladdy along, teaming up with Carlos Correa. And then of course in game one, that dude, that say what you want about Carlos Correa and his season, and say what you want about him being on the Astros, and you don't like Carlos Correa, whatever. The man plays ball, and when it comes to October, the numbers do not matter. This dude is an MVP in October, and he just proved it in game one where he made that nasty play to get Bichette at home. I mean, dude, like what were your overall thoughts on this series and the fact that Twins got their first postseason win since Aaron Rodgers was in college?
If I was a Toronto fan, I would be very heartbroken right now.
Mm-hmm.
Last two wild card series have been very bad for them.
Mm-hmm.
You get knocked out at home against the Seattle Mariners last season, and you get knocked out on the road against a Minnesota Twins team that gave you chances time and time again. And you're right. They went three. Actually, no, I think they were 1 or 3 of 14 with runners in scoring position throughout the series. Like that ain't gonna cut it. I'm sorry.
Mm-mm.
And then I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the decision with Jose Barrios, who was pitching incredibly well, had 5 strikeouts through the first 3 innings, and he walks a guy, and you take him out, and you put Kikuchi in the game, who gives up 2 runs, which define the course of the ball game. Now, I'm not saying that Jose Barrios might not have given up 2 runs in that inning had he stayed out there, but I don't understand that. I know that he said they talked about it, and I understand that baseball has become a game of analytics, but at some point, we have to trust our pitchers, especially when they're playing, or in this case, pitching well, like Jose Barrios was. And you knew he was going to be amped up and motivated going up against his former mates because his career began in Minnesota. So, like, man, that series right there was something. But Royce Lewis, incredible performance, basically won him game one with his production alone. And you got to give credit to Carlos Correa and that Minnesota defense. What Sonny Gray did, that cap tip, that had
even though that decision was questionable, at the end of the day, the offense was, you know, they were if the offense comes back and gets 3 runs, we maybe not even talking about this, but like it, they didn't do anything either. And Schneider did make a good point there. Is like he did also mention like they could be, you can nitpick and talk about this decision, this decision, this decision, but at the same time, like that pitching decision, didn't affect the offense that just didn't do anything. So
I agree with that.
and like yeah, and so it's a lot of things, but that one for sure I think can be magnified because there's too many variables that go into not doing it and doing it to the point where it's like I don't understand why you would do it, but at least they were able to keep the Twins at bay and not not let it get out of the net, not let it get out of hand, keep it in reach, but that was rough and at the bright side though, good for the Twins. They're looking like they could compete at least in that series against the Astros. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to beat the Astros, but I think they could compete with the Astros in that series to at least 3 or 4 games, see what's up. But who knows? We'll see what happens. Moving on now to the Brewers and the Diamondback series. Who, yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie to you, Gabe. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a hater. But when I watch the Brewers play in the playoffs, I become a hater. And and the joy I have of seeing the Brewers get out of the playoffs by the hands of Diamondbacks, I approve this message. But hey, I will say from an unbiased perspective, I will say really surprised, man. I mean, they held the lead in both games, and for as good as their pitching is, like Craig Counsell usually punches all the right numbers when it comes to getting guys out of the bullpen and getting the right matchups. They just clutch hitting from the Diamondbacks is another thing too. I guess you could put it on because in game one, those back-to-back home runs by Carroll, Marte, and then Gabriel Moreno, who unfortunately got hurt in game two, with of course the concussion. Hopefully he's able to play. It's gonna be rough to see. Hopefully he's able to play soon, but they don't know if he'll be able to. I'm sure he'll be on the roster, but they don't know when he's gonna be able to play in the division series. But he's been like as literally as Gabriel Moreno goes, they go. It's just unfortunate that he went down, but yeah, really surprised the Brewers. I know that they didn't have Woodruff, but I don't think that's really a super valid excuse because of the fact that Freddie Peralta is still a great pitcher and he pitched again a hell of a game. Just didn't work out for them. I mean, they just had big hits when he came. I mean, Evan Longoria's defense in game one was crazy. I mean, shades of him in Tampa Bay. Like, dude, like seeing that was pretty awesome because you love to see the vets, do work in big spots because they've been there plenty of times. But man, credit to Alec Thomas, who of course is a product of Illinois, of course a product of Chicago, and also from I don't know which parent it is, but I know one of his parents is Mexican, so he comes from Mexican descent. Yep. And he played his heart out in the World Baseball Classic for Mexico. So again, a lot of credit to Alec Thomas. But man, yeah, what were your thoughts on this series? Because like I said, if any series was going to go 3 games, I really thought it was going to be this one because I thought that they had fought going game 1. The Diamondbacks did, and I was surprised on that move. I know that Gallen couldn't go because of the rest and all that stuff, but still surprised they went with the rookie, and I know that he's talented. I saw it firsthand when they one of the games they beat the Cubs in the last couple weeks of the season, but it worked out ultimately, and the Diamondbacks are heading to the LDS. Man, what did you think?
Man, I gotta give a credit to Torey Lavulo and that Diamondbacks roster. Man, them young dudes, they got some heart.
Mm-hmm.
Most teams, they get down on the road early in the playoffs. They get a little nervous. Those guys, they didn't back down. I really like this team. And when I look at Arizona, they could be to the National League playoff race what Baltimore is to the American League playoff race. And you never know with those young teams what you're going to get. But this team, they play fast. And they don't always hit the long ball, but in this series, they did. And they had timely ones. Christian Walker coming up with clutch hits like he's been doing all year long for this ball club and holding it down at first base. I really like what I'm seeing. Padromo, a guy that we said could have easily been an all-star this season, coming up with some big hits as well. I mean, they took it from Milwaukee. They took this series. And this was the series, I agree with you, Saul, that could have easily went 3 games if a play goes Ari here or there. But Evan Longoria, man, making that stab at third base and doubling off the runner in second to end the inning to get them out that big jam in the middle part of the game in game 1, that was the defining play of the series. And it
Yeah, it
shows why
was.
you got to have some veterans in the lineups from time to time.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean that just I mean and just how cool he is in the moment. Like just I mean like I was watching the game with my sister. I was telling her, hey, this dude's been doing it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And literally every time I think about Evan Longoria in the playoffs, I just think about that. Remember in '08 when in the World Series where they were chanting Eva because of Eva Longoria.
I do remember
Like
that.
that just shows you how long he's been in the league. Like all you gotta say is
Mm-hmm.
Eva Longoria, and you know, damn, he's been in the league for a minute. So like I'm like,
Beat
damn.
my
So
White Sox that year to get to the
yeah.
World
Oh yeah.
Series.
Oh
So I
yeah.
remember
Yeah.
it very
Yeah.
well.
So yeah. Yeah. And you know what's actually what's funny is not to veer off too much, but with in that series, apparently the Brewers did something that the White Sox did in that series, which was I guess I don't know if you saw the stat, but it was like they were one of the only teams in postseason history to lead in all the games and then lose the series. I think the White Sox did that in '08. They had that in the telecast because they were
Yeah,
like they
yeah. I
uh-huh.
think I did see that.
And I was
Don't
like, damn.
remind me of that one.
I was just
But
like,
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
that
damn, they
did
led all
happen.
3 games. I was like, damn, that's rough. But yeah, no, I think with Evan Longoria and the Diamondbacks, I mean, you're right. They could easily make a run, man, because look, you saw what Zach Allen did out there. I mean, the fact that even Torrey said that in the post game said, hey, like I'll give you one that he, after that inning where he had some trouble, gave up a couple runs, he was like, you give me 110 or you let me stay out there for 110 pitches, I'll get you to 7 innings. And he didn't quite make it, but he got deep into the game and he settled in and he showed why he's a Cy Young candidate, man. He shows why he's one of the best pitchers in baseball right now, and he got it done. So Diamondbacks move on. And the other series, man, that it's again just kind of like the Rays, the Ranger series. Phillies, Phillies just toyed with the Marlins, man. They won 2 games to nothing, outscoring the Marlins 11-2. And it honestly just seemed like Marlins had no chance at any point of this. Anytime they try to get a rally going, it died quickly. So, what did you think about this series? I mean, this is something that I think a lot of people expected, but I personally expected a little more of a fight from the Marlins. I didn't think they're going to win the series. I think their better matchup, and I said this before, I think their better matchup was against the Brewers. I think if the Marlins, if these things were switched, then I think that Diamondbacks would have competed a lot more with the Phillies. I don't know about win, but I personally thought the Marlins were going to be able to beat the Brewers. But man, I mean, the Phillies just showed why they're a World Series contender, man. They're in the wild card series, but they're a World Series contender to win it all for sure. I mean, they proved it. They showed us last year why out of nowhere, but now we know, like going into it, I'm pretty sure not a lot of people were doubting them of like making it back. They just reminded everybody why they're a World Series contender, man. What do you think about the series?
Total domination
Yep.
by the starting pitching staff of Philadelphia. You see why they pay Zach Wheeler that big money. I know it hurt a lot of White Sox fans watching that. A guy that they wanted and they thought they were gonna have, but his wife wanted to stay closer to the East Coast, and he got to thank his wife a lot for that one, because what he did in game 1, I think he went 6 strong, didn't allow a walk, struck out like 6 or more batters. You take that, and then Aaron Nola, a guy that's had an up and down season, with the money on the line in closing time, delivered as well. They didn't really have to use their bullpen that much to seal both games. And they look like a team that's going to be a tough out in the LDS round. And if you're the Atlanta Braves, you got to be shaking your head looking at that, because this is the team that knocked you out a season ago in the LDS round. and is also your divisional foe. Man, like that Philadelphia team is for real. Bryce Harper, you see him hustling down the line from first, ignoring the signal from the third base coach to stop. Hey, no problem. No problem. Like that crowd in Philly, man, it's something about that crowd at Citizen Bank Park, man, that them guys look like some world beaters when they there, man. Like that's a place you do not want to play or be behind in a series against this team. And Kyle Schwarber, a guy I know you know very well, coming with it. You know, Stock coming into his own at second. That was a total domination by Philadelphia. Total domination. Kudos to Miami for the year that they had, but I don't think it mattered who they played, whether it's Miami or Arizona. What you saw is what you got from the Phillies.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the crowd, the fact that, you know, I don't know if you saw that video where they just showed the Bryson Stott grand slam with just the crowd noise.
Yeah,
I mean,
saw
that just says it all, man. I mean, like that was insane. And I mean, hell, they got Miles Teller out there in the first row, so they got plenty of star power supporting them. And yeah, I mean, the Phillies, they have a really good chance of taking out the Braves again. I'm going to say it, like they just do. I know the Braves are amazing, but they just do. I mean, they're built for it. And, you know, whether you want to talk about reseeding and that they should, you know, have it differently set up so maybe the Braves and Phillies could meet up in the LCS. You know, it's just the way it is. So I'm not going to argue about that because that's a whole conversation, and I'll tease it. But we'll have another conversation about formatting, I think, once we got more guys in here, because I do want to get your opinion on that, Gabe, because a lot of people were talking about this format and how this wild card series is terrible, blah blah blah, this, all that. But we'll get into we'll talk about it once the postseason's over. Because I think that's a major conversation.
Yeah, that's a conversation I definitely would be a part of. I have a lot of opinions on that.
Yeah. But we'll use that as our next segue into the division series, because you know, there's a lot of great matchups, as you mentioned, the Phillies and Braves. We'll leave that one for last. But we have mentioned, as you know, you mentioned the Orioles, we mentioned the Astros. Now those teams that finished atop their division and finished at the top two records, we get to show up now. Dodgers and Braves in the NL. They're ready to get their licks in. So looking at the series with the Texas Rangers and the Baltimore Orioles, I mean, this is, you know, a matchup of two teams that are fairly young, that have a lot of guys that haven't been through this, but now the Rangers have a series win under their belts, and now they have to take on the Orioles, who have a lot of young guns. And, you know, truly, I don't necessarily know who to pick here, because, you know, you could say who you think is going to win the series, but it's really going to come down to, I think, pitching, ultimately, because, you know, the Rangers, you know, their pitching showed up. But Orioles have had a lot of questions when it comes to their rotation and all that. They have had guys step up like Bradish and all that, understandably so. Like, you know, they have guys like Kyle Gibson, who, don't get me wrong, Kyle Gibson is a veteran, like a guy that you wouldn't necessarily think of him as, like, you know, top three in a rotation. But I guarantee you, if he goes out there in October, he can give you 6 innings, giving up a couple runs. Like, I can see it happen. He's a wily bet. I can see it happen. So this series might, I think, you know, I'm not gonna say might. I think it will go 5 games ultimately, but it's going to be one of the better series, especially because of offense. I think if the pitching doesn't hold up, I mean, the offensive shows these two teams are going to put up are going to be crazy. But what do you think? What are your overall thoughts as we head into the ALDS with the Rangers and Orioles?
You know, I had the pleasure of seeing all these clubs that's in the playoffs on the American League side. And this is a series that I'm excited to watch the most. You talk about the offenses, you talk about the fact that you have a Baltimore squad that's young and this is their first time in the playoffs, and you know they're going to be very hungry, and you know that crowd at Camden Yards is going to be eager and excited to see postseason action for the first time in, I believe, 9 years since I was a senior in college, because I can actually remember that, when Nelson Cruz and then was down to Buck Showalter. But if you say it's going to come down to pitching, if it does come down to pitching, I think that Texas has the advantage, not only with their starting staff, but also even with their bullpen, because the losses that Baltimore took, especially with Felix Bautista being down due to Tommy John, that's a huge loss. And I know they have guys like Cano in the bullpen that can hold it down for him in a spot role. But man, this is gonna be a hell of a series. And to me, this is the series that if you're a true baseball fan and you don't know much about these teams, you want to get to know about these teams prior to noon tomorrow. Because Kyle Bradish is one of the best young pitchers in all of the league. He's going in game one. We don't know who's going in game one for the Rangers, but I'm eager to see this series because you're talking about the two top offenses in the American League, and you're talking about a pair of teams that it don't matter how many runs they get down, you never feel like they out of a ball game because they always fight and compete. You know, like I saw Corey Seager have a 5 RBI night in the middle of June on the South Side, like Adley Rushman, you know, coming up with a clutch double late in the game, like in the top of the seventh. Like these teams are hard to put away, and you have to treat this like a 5-game series if you're watching it. And I'm eager to see how the managers manage their pitching staffs. Bruce Bochy did a hell of a job in the wild card round. Kind of showed a lot of these young managers how they need to manage their bullpen. I'm eager to see how Brandon Hyde will manage his pitchers as well as his bullpen in his first crack at the postseason.
Yeah, you know, this is gonna be it's one of those things too where the manager matchup is interesting too because you know with Brandon Hyde who's been in the game for a long time and talking about being in the game for a long time, Bruce Bochy is a legend. So
yes,
you know
he is.
having Bruce Bochy going up against Brandon Hyde, it's a dude who wants to probably you know with Brandon Hyde probably wants to be in the game you know just as long as Bruce Bochy, and he's doing a hell of a job earning his stripes. And this is you know going to be the first test for the Orioles to see what they could do. And, you know, for the Rangers, with the way they play the Rays, I feel like this is their first big test because, you know, they're going to face a team like the Orioles where, you know, that crowd is going to go crazy no matter what time of day it is because, of course, their central time is going to start at 12:03 on Saturday. Say what you want about daytime games. I bet you Orioles fans are going to be in there and just going crazy with the water guns and everything. Like,
You know they'll be there.
yeah. So it's gonna be intense. I can't wait for that one in particular to start. But moving on to the next series, which is the Astros and Twins. This is the second time they face off in a postseason series since 2020. You know, and of course, you know, that was a series in which the Astros were under 500, and they were able to, you know, come back, win that series, and that was funny. But now it's a whole different ball game, a whole different set of teams here. Like uh, this one, obviously, you can go out there and say Astros are going to win it because I think Astros are going to win it for sure. But I do think that you know what you know the Twins obviously lack a lot when you compare them to the Astros, but the way that they played and the way that Carlos Correa plays in October, that's why I give him a little bit of a chance to at least win one, maybe even two, just because like they have that kind of aura with them now. Like the Twins kind of like have like this thing where they I feel like they feel a little more confident now. And I think they, especially with the series win now as well, um, I think it gives them a little bit more opportunity to at least compete in this series. So I know that the Astros are a whole different animal. I know that they have, I mean, just so many different weapons, whether it be from the bullpen, whether it be the rotation, Yainer Diaz, like just down to when we comes down to it, Astros could easily make the World Series as well. I mean, it's crazy. But what do you think are the chances for the Twins here? Like, how much do you see them competing against what we know is really the class of the AL, honestly?
In order for the Twins to upset Houston, which I don't give a high probability to at all, their pitching has to be just as dominant as it's been all season long. And not only does it have to be as dominant as it's been all season long, but the defense has to be on point. Because offensively, they'll be fortunate to get anywhere between 2 to 3 runs a game. Mm-hmm. Offensively, they've had their struggles. And to be out there without Byron Buxton, who, when healthy, is one of the top hitters in the game, and to be out there, I believe without Joey Gallo as well, like they lack power. Royce Lewis is gonna have to have some majestic performances, just like you saw in the wild card opener against Toronto. That's really where their power is gonna have to come from. But remember, he's dealing with a hamstring issue, and he can only DH at this point in time. Polanco playing at third has had his fair share of struggles a little bit. Like, pitching and defense is going to have to be the way that they win, and they're going to have to find a way to manufacture some runs, because if not, this series could get ugly very quick. And I think Verlander going in game 1, that crowd is going to be into it in Minute Maid. But game 2 against Framber Valdez, a guy that's been up and down this season, despite having a hell of a run in 2022, that's the game that they got to take, in my opinion. Otherwise, this series might end in a sweep.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to their pitching, I think it's one of the things that people were talking about. Going into the series, you're right. You brought up a good point. And the Twins pitching, they got Ober going game 1, and they're facing Verlander. So it's gonna be tough, but how they handle the Pablo Lopez thing, where they pitch Pablo Lopez, Sonny Gray, I think is gonna say it all. And I think it's gonna be the difference in the series, because those are the two guys that, if they're pitching a game, they could easily win that game. And I think, but man, it's rough. I really hope this is a game that goes, 5. This is a series that goes 5 games, because I want to see at least, Minnesota go crazy, with the Astros going into
man,
Minnesota.
that would hurt me, man.
Yeah.
That would hurt the White Sox fan in me. I put it like that. I like to stay non-biased, but now that the Twins have won a series, the White Sox currently have the longest series win drought among AL Central teams now. So I'm very, I will have a very close eye on that series. And I have a lot of friends in Houston, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I hope that they continue to do the job.
Yeah, I Gabe, you have nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, I'm thinking the same thing with like the Brewers, right? So it's
I know you were. That's why I was thinking about it.
So, but no, yeah, I think it's going to be more fascinating series than I think people are going to credit to, is really ultimately what I'm trying to say. And I think hopefully it does come out to that. But we'll leave the best for last. So we'll leave the Phillies Braves for last. But the Diamondbacks and Dodgers. We've seen this a couple of times now. I think in the last like 10 years, them playing in this. I mean, we saw when JD Martinez was hot in the Diamondbacks, they faced off in the playoffs. And I feel like Diamondbacks, they win a game or so, they put up a fight, but ultimately Dodgers always come through. I think that's probably what's going to happen in this series too. But is there something to be said about Corbin Carroll, this new wave of Diamondbacks players? They could go out there and pull off an upset, because look, I know that the Dodgers have a lot of questions pitching wise. We've seen the Dodgers, lose early in the postseason plenty of times in the last decade. Do you see the Diamondbacks putting up a fight in any way with this Dodger team? Maybe even an upset. Like, what is your overall thoughts on this LDS series, man?
I got a lot of thoughts on this series, because to me, both of these series in the NL, as far as division series go, these are going to be must-watch series. Hell yeah, Arizona got a chance. They're division foe. They see one another 13 times out the year. I don't see, like, I would be excited, chomping at the bit, if I was in the Diamondbacks clubhouse, especially after what I saw last season when the Dodgers were in this same scenario against the San Diego Padres, a team that a lot of people thought were their little brother. And the little brother ended up winning. That could easily happen again. We know that David Roberts has a bad habit of not knowing how to manage his bullpen well with the money on the line. We also know that this Arizona group is young, fun, and hungry. Corbin Carroll is going to put on a show. Christian Walker is going to have some big time outings. You got to be thinking to yourself, if you're Arizona, if we get one game, just one game in Chavez Ravine, we in good shape. You have to. Because like these teams know one another. They know what, like, you can't hide if you LA from the Diamondbacks. You cannot hide. This series could easily go 5 games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right, and the fact that in the season series was 8-5 Dodgers, so it's not like
Yeah, I
it was
just pulled that up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's not like it was a dominated, they didn't dominate them at all whatsoever. No, I mean this was a close affair all season long, and the thing with Corbin Carroll too, as you mentioned him, like that's what I feel like is a game changer to me because Corbin Carroll I feel like is a game changer. That dude is one of the best players in baseball. It's not talked about obviously because he's a rookie, he's just starting off, but the league's going to find out quickly who Corbin Carroll is. And I mean, I think if you don't know by now in the wild card series, I mean, you might never know because I mean, this guy is just insane. And like, he's going to show you time and time again that he's got the power, he's got the speed, the fielding. Like, this dude does it all. And I think playing against LA in the playoffs, I think will give him an even brighter spotlight to put on a show. And as you said, you mentioned that like I think he will put on a show. I think it's going to be one of the main things that keeps the Diamondbacks in the series if it does go 5. So yeah, and you talked about Christian Walker, like that dude, like I feel like he's not talked about enough either, right?
At
Like
all.
he drives and runs, he hits big home runs, and he's been doing it for years. It's not like it's not like there's a first year he's doing it. He's been doing it for years, and he's finally getting the chance to do it on the big stage. And he's so far so good. And this, yeah, it's gonna be real fascinating series to watch. Clayton Kershaw going game 1. They haven't Diamondbacks haven't picked their pitcher for game 1 yet. So we'll see what they do. Everyone's assuming it's gonna be Merrill Kelly, who knows the Dodgers obviously all too well, just like everyone else. Has pitched great games against the Dodgers. So it's going to be awesome to see. And of course, it being in LA, going to be 9 o'clock, or later starting time for, 8 o'clock. So everyone gets to watch that one. No excuse on that one. So I'm excited for that one for sure. But we saved the best for last, man. Phillies, Braves, which, kind of wish, as I said, people can complain about the format. I wish it was an NLCS matchup. I know, but either way, we get to see them in a series. And to be fair, you can make an argument too. They played enough that they don't have to play a 7-game series. 5-game series is enough because they see each other enough in the regular season. But dude, this series is gonna be insane because really you look at it on paper and you could if nobody saw these two teams play all season and you saw them on paper and you're like, oh, Braves should win it, like, whatever, 3-1, whatever you want to say. But you see the Phillies play an actual game and they're different, especially in the playoffs. And they got Ranger Suarez going in game 1, who could set the tone. We saw what he did in the playoffs last year. Yeah, I mean this one for sure is locked. I think at 5 games. If the Braves, I know Max Fried threw a simulated game. A Spencer Strider. Is he supposed to pitch in this series? Spencer Strider.
Have the Braves announced their starters yet? Because see, that's the thing I'm curious to see is who is starting. I would assume game 1 starter has to be Spencer Strider.
Oh yeah, they haven't announced their game 1.
I would assume
yeah.
Spencer has to be the starter in game 1. And I would assume Max Fried would be the guy that they start in game 2.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think I believe they're probably set to be in this series. I don't know if they'd announced it or like the Braves announced their because they have not announced a rotation. So
right.
Yeah. They're gonna if they have Max Fried, they're gonna have all the weapons out there to be able to put the Phillies away. Will they do it? Is gonna be a whole different story. But that's gonna be the game changer because that's what people going into the postseason were talking about, the fact that like the Braves and Dodgers, they have questions on their rotations. With the Braves with Fried and Strider, so if they're able to put those guys out there, it changes things, and I think it gives a little bit more in favor to the Braves. But you can't count the Phillies out at all. And I think that's probably makes the series the most exciting one yet. And, Phillies were able to take out the Braves last year. Can they do it again? Probably. And it's gonna be the real test for the Braves because they've been probably the best team in baseball all season long. Like you could say about the Rays for the first 2 months, whatever, but Braves consistently from the beginning to end were the best team in baseball. And, with probably the MVP of the NL, Acuna, Olsen, Like they're just top to bottom the class of the NL. What are your thoughts on this series and ultimately who you think comes out on top?
They say this a National League Division Series. No, this not no National League Division Series right here. This the National League Championship Series.
Mm-hmm.
It's just around early because of the way it's formatted. I think whoever wins this series, I'm just gonna say it straight up.
Yep.
So whoever wins this series is gonna represent the National League in the Fall Classic.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just get that out the way. I mean, this series got everything you want. It got the stars. You got the best team in the league. Spencer Strider's going game one. It's just a matter of when they announce it. I just want to see, did Atlanta learn their lesson? I've heard that they've been holding like scrimmage games to stay fresh, that they had the ballpark full of fans and the battery to take that in. And, a lot of guys have said they've learned from last year. I want to see it. I know Ronald Acuna Jr. is going to be excited and hungry to be fully healthy playing in October for the first time in a while, especially after what happened 2 years ago when the Braves won the World Series and he was unable to be out there on the field with them due to tearing his ACL. I mean, like, they got the power, and this is a team you can't give free outs to by any means. You make any mistake defensively, 9 times out of 10, this lineup's going to make you pay. You look on that. I think the lowest home run total is Orlando Arcia, and he has 17. Like, this Braves offense is the modern day version of Murder's Row. And when you look at them, you can't help but be enthused by what you see. To me, they have the most pressure on them. Anytime you win 100 games in the postseason, everything starts 0-0. Like, everybody expecting Atlanta to get there. So I'm going with Atlanta to win. I think they can win it in 4, but if it goes 5, I'm not surprised. And this is a series that you have to look at as a 5-game series, no differently than what we talked about in the ALDS round with those series, such as like Baltimore and Texas. So, like, man, hey, I just want them to put the ball out there and have them play ball, man, because this is gonna be a hell of a series for fans to watch.
Yeah, that it will for sure be the best. I think I think everything points that it's as good as last year, if not better. And with Spencer Strider, as you said, probably going game one. Saw a tweet from Codify looking at his matchups against the Phillies this year: 6 innings, 2 runs, 9 Ks; 6 innings, 1 run, 9 Ks; 7 innings, 1 run, 9 Ks; 7 innings, 3 runs, 11 Ks. So 2 things: he's been dominating the Phillies this year. But from a Philly perspective, you might say, is he due?
Oh yeah, you got to think that way. You got to think that way. Yeah, like, we got the footage. We done got multiple looks at you. We know you.
Yep.
You in our division. Like, you have to think that way, and that don't mean nothing this time of the year. Those quality starts are cute in the regular season. He might get a Cy Young to show for his efforts at the end of the winter, but right now, that don't mean nothing. If you guys like Bryce Harper and whatnot, you like, hey man, it's a new season. Hey, yeah, they won the National League East, but they did that same shit a year ago, and they didn't get as far as we did. That's the way you got to look at it.
Yeah, So it's the one thing too is that if the Phillies would have faced the Marlins, if they would have faced the Diamondbacks, whatever, it would have been different. And you almost feel like maybe the other team is going to be like starstruck a little bit. Like maybe, this team, look at, they're facing the Braves, with all these stars and World Series champions from, a couple years ago. Look, this Phillies team, not scared whatsoever, this Braves team. So that's why they're not intimidating whatsoever. They're not intimidated whatsoever. I think that's the best part of it. And I think that's why it's going to be an awesome series, and I can't wait. So the division series, of course, kicks off on Saturday the 7th. By the time we record next week, they'll be over. So we'll run down all of the division series talk next week. But I think that's a good place to wrap things up for this edition of the At Bat podcast. I want to thank Gabe Wilkins for joining me this time around. Of course, if you want to hear all his sports talk, talking about Justin Fields, talking about all kinds of sports on there with the state of the Gave, exclusively on Spotify. Gabe, thanks for joining me, man. Appreciate it. And
Anytime.
for everyone watching the At Bat podcast, of course, check out all their War Media content with Slam Society as well as the Bears Den. Enjoy that, and of course, everyone enjoy the weekend. Take it easy.